The Euros final is here, and the two teams playing in it are maybe the ones we should have expected all along. Welcome to this week's edition of The Late Sub. I am your host, Claire Watkins. It is Thursday, July 24th, and we're going to be talking through the last two knockout round games for England and Spain, how they've made it to the Euros final, and what we can expect, because it's going to be a very, very good game. Let's jump in. So our summer of Euros soccer is almost over. We have reached the final, and it's the final that nobody even knew that they wanted. It has come to pass. That's right, folks. We are getting Spain versus England round 2. This is a rematch of the 2023 World Cup final, which people will remember Spain won 1-0. And both of these finalists have survived 2 rounds of absolutely bonkers knockout soccer to get here. We're going to talk about it, talk about some of the tendencies of both of these teams, why either of them truly have a shot in this game on Sunday, and what this sort of means for the larger tournament. Like many knockout tournament rounds, the quarterfinals and the semifinals of the Euros this year, sometimes you saw clear tactics and free-flowing football and a clarity of purpose, and you saw things go to plan. And sometimes you just saw a series of increasingly unlikely events. Both are fun in their own way. I think knockout soccer, I say this a lot, sometimes all that matters is just who wins and who makes it past. And it's not necessarily all that important about what it looked like or how it got done. Certainly one of these teams is going to feel that way after going through this tournament. But I also think that that's kind of the brilliance of knockout soccer as well, which is even with, 5 subs versus 3, as people know it used to be before 2020, I do think that you see sort of the ebbs and flows of the incredible psychological task at hand in this sport. And I think that it's one of the things that makes soccer so unique is that, can you hold on to a game plan for 90 minutes? Can you keep your confidence? Can you deal with shifts in momentum when there aren't stoppages of play? I think it's sometimes knockout soccer in an international tournament is not necessarily the best that the sport has to offer. But I think what we have seen in the Euros is actually a very compelling psychological element to the game. And that's one of the most fun things too, in addition to just finding out who's going to win. So let's talk about how we got here, the journeys that led all of us to maybe what was always going to be the most likely of places in this, this World Cup rematch between England and Spain. And again, why either of these teams really do have a shot at making a little bit of history on Sunday. And let's start with England, the comeback queens of the tournament. I mentioned the psychology of the sport just a couple seconds ago. England is that team. They arrive at their second consecutive Euros final. Obviously, they are the reigning champions. It's their third major tournament final in 4 years. And they've made it by a whole lot of sheer will, determination, a little bit of luck from their opponent's side, maybe some crash outs on the opponent's side, one controversial penalty. Maybe you need a little bit of luck there too. And their performances have a theme. This team gets into trouble early, basically, is the beginning and the ending of how all of these performances have come to pass for England. They get into deep trouble against Sweden in their quarterfinal. They concede 2 goals. They come back to tie in regulation and win in what I believe is statistically the worst PK shootout of all time, or possibly it maybe just in Euros history, to make it to the semifinals. They make it to the semifinals against Italy. They also concede early, equalized in the dying moments of second half stoppage time, awarded that penalty in extra time, and advanced 2-1. In the quarterfinal, England had heroes come off the bench. More on that in a second. But talking about maybe opponent crash outs, in that quarterfinal, I think England also benefited greatly from something of like a classic Swedish meltdown, unfortunately. I've said multiple times throughout the last couple of weeks that Sweden has this stereotype at this point of being really strong. They're strong starters of a tournament. They fade when the going gets tough. And I think that whole ethos was at play in just sort of a 120-minute plus nutshell in that quarterfinal. Start off flying up 2-0. They let England back into it with a little bit over 10 minutes to go. Can't find any momentum in extra time and miss literally 5 of their 7 taken penalties, which was reported out that they did not practice. This is what I love about knockout soccer is you're like, oh, didn't think this was going to come up. Sometimes you find out like these little pieces of dysfunction for these teams, and that is the difference. And hey, good, that was great for England. They were able to get the win. But then England does it again. Like you watch that quarterfinal and you go, that was nuts. That seems unlikely to happen again. Was this so much England exerting their will on a game, or was this simply watching one team not be able to step into the spotlight and kind of grab something that they haven't been able to do in a very long time? But then England does it again in the semifinal, and it starts to feel like this is simply how the Lionesses this tournament are set up to compete. I'm sure they're not happy with the slow starts. I wouldn't be either, but the ability to come back is pretty incredible, and not least the fact that they were able to do it twice in a row. Because these comebacks, I mean, Serena Wiegmann after their semifinal win, I think called it a movie. Like, this is not something that happens often. I don't think it's going to plan for England, but they are sort of leaning on these principles that we knew that they had at the beginning of the tournament. It is unlikely for them to be here in the fashion in which they have advanced in their last two games, but it's also not. Wiegmann is a rigid tournament coach. This isn't news to anybody. This was true when she coached the Netherlands. It's true when she coaches England. She doesn't change her starting 11 much, and her subs seem very calculated and less reactionary to game states. She goes in with a fairly static game plan. She trusts her group. And I think that can cause problems. I think we've seen some of the larger, issues come home to roost with the defense, again, in the conceding early. And that's not just even about just tournament performance. That's as much about just sort of cultivating the right players to be in that back line after a couple of years of getting to sort of cultivate that roster before another European championship. But you do also see the flip side of that and how they've made it this far, which is that the trust in her starting unit has paid off. You're seeing players get cooked in 1 minute and then show up in the next. You see a lot of, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde performances from these players, but they're stepping up in the biggest moments when they need them to get themselves maybe out of the trouble that they've gotten themselves into. And there is a depth advantage that England also has that is perhaps rewarded by very calculated subs. And again, just sort of sticking with that starting 11 that is able to gut it out for a long, either 90 to 120 minutes. And I think that this depth advantage that England has is possibly the deepest bench in all of this tournament, even more than Spain. And we'll kind of see that play out on Sunday. It's been a mixed bag, right? The performance start generally poorly, but they also inevitably result in the Lionesses moving on. Wiegmann did make one significant defensive change between the team's quarterfinal and semifinal, replacing Jess Carter with Esme Morgan on form. Well, luckily, I think this was a little bit of a lucky moment for England as well, which is that, Leah Williamson has been able to gut it out after picking up a knock in the quarterfinal that allowed them to make the form switch for Carter out, Esme Morgan in. That back line against Italy gave up 1 goal instead of 2. I am really interested in what configuration they ultimately decide on for the final, especially given Morgan's inexperience at the major tournament level. That's kind of what I'm talking about with the big picture for England, where I don't think they necessarily, did enough of the cultivating of some of these big tournament experiences or at least, consecutive minutes for some of these players going into this tournament, which leaves you with maybe Esme Morgan is the player that you want in terms of just actual form. Jess Carter has struggled in this tournament. But then are you going to be starting her in a Euros final when she got her first major tournament cap just in the semifinal? These are the questions that England finds for themselves because of the way that Wiegmann has managed this whole international period over the last couple of years. And Wiegmann does wait for subs. It just kind of is what it is. But that actually turns out to have been a strength for England, maybe making it nervy. But they do have this depth off the bench. Like I mentioned, they can bring on Beth Mead. They can bring on Chloe Kelly. And they can also bring on the breakout performer of the entire tournament, who is Michelle Adjumang, England's darling. Just incredible player, wonderful to watch. The process of watching England bring Adjumang on, where you're just waiting and waiting and waiting. They've been down. There has not been a single knockout game that she has come into where they were not chasing a goal, and you're like, surely, bring her on. She's going to do it. And then finally, Wiegmann brings Adjumang on. You could say waiting for tired legs. I think I would give her a little bit more minutes, but it seems to be working. And she has scored 2 equalizers in as many games. She is the hero of the England women's national team. They don't make it this far without her. She's also just a really fun story. I think this is part of why it seems like she's such a star. It's like a Star is Born moment. Seems like a wonderful person. She's only 19. She earned her first call up with the England senior team just 3 months ago. See, what am I saying about sort of cultivating this roster? They're kind of picking, these people in. They're bringing people in that are saving the team that have not gotten a lot of experience. It's kind of they're making it despite themselves. Ajimang was developed through Arsenal's youth academy. She spent this past season on loan with Brighton. You certainly have to wonder if she's going to spend more time at the core club at Arsenal this year. She's like a piano player. There's a lovely story where England's kit man brought her a piano over to Switzerland so that she could play it in her downtime. She was the ball girl for England in 2022 when they won the whole thing at home. And she is the reason why the Lionesses are even here in the first place. Like I said, you just never know. I don't think you know exactly how much credit to give this team in the moment a lot. You also, though, just have to wonder if things might have been a little bit easier if some of these players had gotten more time before they made it to Switzerland. But you know what? It's happening now. And you can't discount mentality. Like, I think my final thought on why I do actually think these, unrepeatable performances might be repeatable one more time in this final against Spain is I think the 2 goals against Italy in this semifinal are a good encapsulation, both of like why they're in this position of making it to the final and why it's been nervy, but also why they could win. They do get themselves into trouble, but then the other team maybe goes a little bit too negative trying to close out the game. Again, it's the psychology of being so close to your goal of advancing, or in this case is going to be winning the tournament. Maybe the other team gets too defensive. Their subs are too defensive. England has the stamina, they have the fitness, and they have the subs to really make a late push. And then that second goal against Italy was a little bit of veteran savvy, right? It was a soft pen. Beth Mead went down a little bit soft, but it does get called. She was, Italy fans can argue for the next, 50 years about whether or not she was actually impeded, but does enough to get that call. And then Chloe Kelly, cool as you like, make sure that particular penalty find its way to the back of the net. It was off a rebound. It's been a bad tournament for penalties, which I don't have much commentary for other than just like I said, it's been a psychologically tough tournament and also practice them more. But Chloe Kelly, cool as you like, makes sure that gets scored. And then that's their way into the finals. So I think that you look at that whole package of there are enough young players stepping up. They are being trusted without being necessarily over or under managed. Going down a goal does not seem to phase them. Going down 2 does not seem to phase them. And they've been here before. And I think you lose one final like they did in the World Cup. And I think that you start to think, okay, how can we flip the script here? How can we take all of these experiences to get over the top this time? And I do think that that's possible for England, despite some of the troubles that they've had. However, they're not going to be the only team on the pitch. Spain, perhaps unlike their opponent, England, no one is surprised that Spain is still here at the end of the tournament. They were my pick from the very beginning, but that's not hard. That's a safe bet. I don't really get to pat myself on the back for saying, yes, I thought Spain was going to be very good. Everyone thought Spain was going to be very good. I just get to say all of these things. I get to repeat all of these kind of superb, these kind of, flowery things about Spain because they're all true. They're great against European competition. They don't lose their heads and they can't unlock a sturdy defense, which is part of why we have seen kind of that explosion of the ability to make it to these finals and win things. They rarely have to leave first gear because first gear is so excellent and serves them so well, but they can trust that process and kind of methodically break a team down. And they're fun to watch play. They only had one particularly tense game in the last two knockout round games. They eased past Switzerland, though. Both goals came in the second half. Took them a second to unlock that Sweden defense, but they, eased past that game 2-0 in the quarterfinal. Not a lot to be said other than thank you, Switzerland. Wonderful, wonderful hosts. The system was working. They were sinking their shots. Took over 45 minutes of buildup, but that was a very system win again. First gear win for Spain. Their semifinal against Germany was harder, and I actually think that game sets them up really well for this final against England. We have to talk about Germany for a second. I think I would like to, at least as we say goodbye to them. They were a tightly wound team in these knockout rounds. As we know, they went down to 10 players very early in their quarterfinal against Spain due to a hair pull. This has been crazy. This has been a crazy tournament, guys. But that in some ways actually made them harder to break down. They had trouble with their transition defense. They could get stretched at times. This is what Sweden did to them in their final group stage game. But after going down to 10 players in the quarterfinal and then being kind of limited in terms of who they had available due to injury and suspension in the semifinal. This was a compact team. This was a team that was very much like this sharpened weapon, harder to combat, I think, even the more compact that they became. This worked against France. Again, very unlikely victories here. They sneak an equalizer off a set piece, which is based off a counter, let France pass themselves to death after, before another PK shootout. Germany doesn't lose those. Goodbye to France. I don't understand you. We can't spend too much time on that, but another wasted opportunity for France. But then against Spain, I actually think the football was pretty fun. Like I said, sometimes you get these clear tactics, sometimes you don't. This was a clear tactical game in this semifinal between Germany and Spain. And that allowed you to see kind of the two-headed monster that Spain becomes when they're up against top competition. Germany's defensive commitment gave them issues. It really did. This game went to extra time. It was scoreless at the end of 90. It took extra time for Spain to be able to find that breakthrough goal. And there was a certain amount of lackadaisical passing in the final third for Spain that was a little bit too easy to pick off. You could also see sometimes Spain pausing in the energy in the midfield, letting Germany get into the counter and move and put them in serious danger of conceding. That's actually where I think Germany's fatigue hit them the hardest, was not in the defensive moments or anything like that. I think it was actually the fact that they couldn't make the counters count because of both physical and mental fatigue is what sunk Germany in this semifinal. But then in extra time, again, you get to the end of this regulation. Spain has not been able to unlock Germany. We're seeing a wonderful performance again from German keeper Anne-Katrin Berger. Check her out at Gotham FC, another NWSL player who's really crushing it in this tournament. They're in extra time, and I'm watching this and I'm thinking, the passing's not getting sharper in front of goal for Spain. I don't know where this goal is coming from. And I think this is how you play Spain. You stay compact, you try to hit on the counter, you force them into, again, that stereotype of kind of all fancy footwork, no substance. But the goal that sent them through was just kind of a moment of individual brilliance from Aitana Bonmatí, which, no surprise there, right? She's one of the best players of the world, if not the best player in the world. But at the very beginning of this shot, you think that it is a botched cross. You think it is a schross, which is what we call it in the States, a mistake. But it actually ended up being a calculated exploitation. Oh my gosh. It actually ended up being a calculated exploitation of a player that had been cooking Spain all game. This near post shot that exploited the fact that Anne-Katrin Berger was cheating a little bit. She was cheating a little bit on these crosses where she was taking a step forward and not covering the near post. Bonmatí said that Spain had actually scouted that. Slight overcommitment from Katrin Berger. She should have had that near post shot covered, but also Bonmatí knew that she wasn't going to in a calculated decision. That's how you solve the puzzle. That's how you open the locked defense. And I think that them getting that done and not having to go to a penalty shootout because they saw the game, unfolding in front of them, and they were able to take that, develop it, and have it not have to be this like beautiful system goal, is why Spain is also going to be incredibly difficult to beat. Because maybe we do see, it's possible. We have not seen this a lot in this tournament. Every time I show up to a knockout game at the Euros, I think to myself, oh, this one's going to be the normal one where you see the system work. But really the only game that was like that was really Spain's win over Switzerland in terms of these two teams. But if Spain is able to come in and blow England out of the water on Sunday, I think you'd have to say it's been building to that, right? You see their midfield, maybe you see their midfield passing work. You see these kind of like deft one-touch movements. You see these lovely worked goals maybe. But then you do actually have to go back to the 2023 World Cup final and go, that's not exactly how that one went either, because England is going to make this really hard. And so it is key that Spain can figure these things out when things don't go exactly to plan, because the number one way to frustrate the reigning world champions is to not let them win in first gear. Don't let them do it, because they do get flustered sometimes. Sometimes they work through it, just like they did against Germany, but that has to be the game plan for England. What happens on Sunday, all of that said, it really should be Spain. I think maybe too easy, but from the beginning of the tournament till now, they've been the best team. They have a variety of different ways to beat you. They are deep. They've looked comfortable. England's, again, their trajectory has been difficult. It's been an uphill climb for them. Both teams have to be very tired. Both teams are dealing with knocks. both of their managers are very rigid in their management. There could be slight moments, slight mistakes here where one of these managers kind of slips up, whether it's not getting that starting 11 exactly right for both England or Spain, whether it is the subbing patterns. I'm very curious to see how negative England goes, whether they're going to be focusing on disrupting and countering, whether they're going to try to play Spain straight up, what that's going to turn into. But both of these squads are very experienced. They're very deep. They know each other really well, both from Champions League play, as we saw famously this spring, and international experience. I could see England, like I said, ceding the lion's share of possession to Spain. If they don't want to get cooked, they don't want to get cooked in space behind like they did their last two games. We could see an early goal by Spain. I could also see them opening this up in an attempt to get on the board because, as we said, Spain is actually very susceptible on the counter if they let possession cede. But you just have to wonder at what point the good luck runs out for England. Spain are the best team of the tournament. They should have this in regulation. I'm sticking with them. But England are the exact team I would not want to face in this situation. So hopefully we get some fireworks on Sunday to cap off what has been a really fun Euros tournament. The Late Sub is part of the Just Women Sports Network. This show is written by Claire Watkins and produced and edited by Parker Fenton. To get more of your favorite women's sports content, subscribe to the Just Women Sports newsletter and follow Just Women Sports across all your favorite channels.